government resources to help you in navigating government contracting. So I've been with the SBA for 8 years. I work primarily with businesses that are certified in the 8A Business Development Program. I'm going to talk about the 8A program today, not really in depth, but just more of a broad overview of what the program is. But we also work a lot with the Procurement Technical Assistance Center because they are truly your boots on the ground in getting started in government. Everything from how do you decide to do business with a government? What does it mean to do business with a government? Because there's multiple layers. It's not just the government. There's federal, state, city, county. So this webinar today is an introduction to that. Because we find with the Ohio Business Matchmaker, the more that we can help businesses prepare for the event, the better the outcome. So today it's more on getting started in government. So that's, I'm working with Bill Cox, who is the, you have a new title, Bill, I can never remember it, but you're the procurement analyst for the Dayton area. You're associate director now. I'll let you correct me when it's when you start talking, but Bill and I have worked together for many years. We truly try to make this a collaborative effort. So Sharon Smith is Sharon Hopkins is the OU PTAC program director. It's really wonderful to have her with us to help with this webinar, so that as questions come up, you can send the question through chat, and we will do our best to answer it at that time, because sometimes the train of thought can get lost as we go through the slides. So without further ado, Bill, I'm going to go ahead and have you get started.
Okay, thank you very much, Jill. As Jill said, I'm Bill Cox, and I'm the Associate Director for Southwest Ohio for the Ohio University PTAC. And we're glad that you're here this morning. This webinar that Jill said is part of a series leading up to the Ohio Business Matchmaker. And as I go through my presentation this morning, I'm going to briefly reference related seminars that are upcoming that you may be interested in. And to sign up for those seminars, you can go to our PTAC webpage. And at the bottom, very, very bottom of the webpage will be a list of all the seminars. And you can click on one, and then that will take you to the detailed description of that seminar. And then there'll be a button there for register. So it's pretty easy. Now, I'm going to touch on a lot of topics today, and a lot of them do lead into discussions or topics that are going to be covered in later seminars. So you may feel at times that I'm going to take you up to the water's edge, but I'm not going to lead you across the river, and that's deliberate. So with that, why don't we get started? Now, if you can see my second slide, I'm starting here. I'm going to give you a warning right up front. I'm going to tell you today not what you want to hear, but I'm going to tell you today what you need to hear. And there is a difference. What I would like you to take away from this seminar today, if nothing else, is that to be successful in government contracting, you have to have a plan. And you've got to review it and revise it regularly. And your plan is going to be, how do I get business from the government? Or how do I get business starting out as a subcontractor? Or how do I get a GSA schedule? Whatever your plan and objective is, you need to have a plan. But remember, like the old adage goes, no plan remains constant after contact with the enemy. And in this case, who could the enemy be? Well, you know, as you're going along on this journey, and it is a journey to get ready to do government business, the government will change things. For example, a couple years ago, we wouldn't have been talking about cybersecurity and about the need to get your business certified at the appropriate level for cybersecurity. And oh, by the way, next week on the 20th of October, PTAC, along with probably SBA and maybe some other agencies, we are holding a seminar on cybersecurity, one of several that the PTACs in Ohio have held over the last year. So if you're sitting there saying, gee, this is the first time I've heard about cybersecurity, what's it's all about? Maybe you want to go sign up for and attend that webinar on the 20th. The government will also issue mandatory contract vehicles and say that all the procurement in this particular category of spending is going to be put on this particular set of contract vehicles. You're going to have solicitations you're going to be wanting to bid on that are going to get canceled, or you're going to have solicitations be released that you weren't planning on. So there's all sorts of changes that the government can make that will affect your plan. Prime contractors are also going to affect your plan because they will either need or not need subcontractors. And you maybe had counted on getting some subcontract work in a particular area, and you discover that all that work is put on a mandatory contract vehicle, and all the primes currently have all their subcontractors identified. And we'll touch on that in a little bit.
Excuse me, Bill. Quick question. Would you be able to talk about exactly what a contract vehicle is?
Sure. A contract vehicle, for example, the Air Force has a set of contracts called the NetSense 2, and it's for IT services and products. As a matter of fact, they just recently recompeted the set of NetSense small business contracts for application services development. And so they awarded several contracts to companies that will now compete with each other when the Air Force needs applications development that's going to be put on the small business set of NetSense contracts. And those contracts have a 10-year ordering period and a 15-year period of performance. So, you know, for example, you're an IT application development company, and you're wanting to get into government business, and you look on the map and say, gee, there's that Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, and they do an awful lot of IT work. Well, yeah, they do. But if the work is not currently in the 8A program, which Jill will talk about later, and it's work that's traditionally been done by small business, more than likely, when they compete the task order, they're going to put it and compete it among the existing contract holders for the NetSense small business application services development set of contracts. And if you're not one of the prime contractors, or you're not one of the subcontractors, guess what? You're shut out. Another example is the General Services Administration. They have a set of contracts called the OASIS contracts for program services that the business will hire. That program offices in the government will hire. People who will help them track their finances. People who help them do their program schedules. Functional experts in different areas for the different IT systems that the government uses. That was a contract vehicle that was competed. Several agencies have come online and have told the organizations within their agency that if you're going to buy these kind of services, you are going to use the GSA OASIS contract vehicle. So if you had not won one of those GSA OASIS prime contracts, or were not a subcontractor to a GSA OASIS prime, you're not going to receive the RFP or the RFQ when the government has a requirement that they want to hire resources to help them support a government program office. Those are just two examples of mandatory contract vehicles. There are others. And finally, and Sharon, I hope you've got the recording going. You're going to have issues, because you're going to have issues with how much resources you can put against this and what your priorities are. And oh, by the way, you're going to have changes elsewhere that are going to affect your available resources, either temporarily or maybe permanently decrease them or increase them. So there's kind of the summary in this little area is there's lots of little things that can impact your plan. But I do want to tell you that all the knowledge that you gain before you seriously start pursuing government contracting is going to pay big dividends later. Understanding the process and how it all fits together, getting that big picture is going to be essential, and it will help you make sense out of what's going on around you, and it will also make you more effective. Now, I want to talk a little bit about, here's what I see from my perspective, and I've seen this from lots of companies. They don't really appreciate, and they underestimate this process. They kind of go along the path of, well, I've signed up for PTAC. I registered my business in the system for award management. Yeah, I know the PTAC talked to me about putting together a capability statement. And, well, I got something down on paper. I worked on it 30 minutes this morning, so I got something here. But nobody in the government or industry has ever heard about my company. I don't have any past performance. I can't tell them where I've done this work before that I'd like to get. And I can't tell anybody anything unique about my product or service. Now, I've been sitting by the phone waiting for a prime contractor to call me about subcontracting, or the government to call wanting to know more about my company, or send me an RFP. I've been sitting here 2 weeks. Nobody's called. What could possibly be wrong with my plan? I see this happen over and over again. So I want to challenge you. start with this big question. Put yourself in a government contracting officer's or a prime contractor's shoes. Why should I award a contract or subcontract to this company? If you can't answer the question and you haven't provided the answer in your upfront business development meetings with the government or a prime contractor, or you haven't answered that question in a proposal, don't expect either one of those parties to waste any time trying to look for a reason either. And that's kind of the cold, hard truth. And I've got something here, and this is I'm kind of hitting you with some more cold water. You know, with very few exceptions, you need prime contractors for subcontracting much more than they need you. And here's why. As far as the primes go, all of them typically have an existing network of subcontractors they use, they know them, and they trust. The government also knows and trusts their existing subcontractors. The subcontractors the prime has chosen to be in their network fill in capability or past performance gaps that the prime contractor may have. And the primes and subcontractors have worked together so closely that they understand their subcontractors. They understand their strengths and weaknesses and any risks that the subcontractors bring. And because of all that, the prime contractors already know how to position to try to win a contract and how to write proposals with subcontractors they regularly use. And those existing subcontractors understand the prime's processes, that they have learned them from how they do proposals to how they do business and where they can contribute to the prime's value proposition. The bottom line is you have to find them and sell them on why they need your company. They aren't going to seek you out. Now, I've had several slides that have kind of hit you in the face with cold water. Here's one that's a little more uplifting, if you will. We went back and did some analysis back in calendar year 2019. And for the PTAC clients that are part of the state of Ohio PTAC network, between federal, state, and local government, either prime contracts or subcontracts, you know, our clients received over $1 billion in revenue. And that's a billion with a B. That's not a bad year. So let's start with some of the basics. You know, that capability statement. You know, by the way, we are having a seminar you can sign up for on the 27th of October that's going to go into much more detail on the capability statement. Give your capability statement some serious attention, because this could be your first impression that the government or a prime contractor has about your company. Now, I'm not going to go into how you do a capability statement. They're going to do that on the 27th. But I am going to tell you, here's some of the biggest mistakes I regularly see in a capability statement. First of all, they're written in prose versus short, hard-hitting phrases and bullet statements. You know, nobody has time to read War and Peace. It's an interesting book. I enjoyed reading it when I was younger, but it took a lot of time. In the past performance section, it omits key details, dates, contract numbers, dollar value of the work, and a customer reference and a description of the work. I see capability statements with too many core capabilities. On your capability statement, just list what you do best, what you could perform and deliver with your eyes closed. Don't try to tell me everything that you could ever do. There is a section on differentiators. What makes you different from all your competitors? I see too many of the capability statements, and admittedly, this is a hard section, that are too generic. I'll see differentiators such like, we have great people. Well, heck, who doesn't have great people? You know, a more powerful differentiator could be, you know, one of 3 companies in Ohio that has this capability, or can do this, or has this certification, or, you know, has people on staff with these type of degrees. Whatever it is, something that makes you stand out. And then the last one is, too often it's a bland document that puts the reader to sleep. You know, there's nothing unique about it. It's just like reading a page out of a book. Put some graphics in there, or put some pictures that help explain some part of the capability statement. Something that's visually appealing, that catches the reader's eye. Because the government or prime contractors may only scan this document for 45 seconds. And they may decide after 45 seconds, you know, is this a company that maybe has something interesting that we want to learn more about? Or might be a company that might help us win this upcoming contract, whatever it is? Or is this just, you know, another one to throw in the pile? And I guarantee you, you don't want to be in the pile. Now, let's talk a little bit about getting ready for contracting for services. If your business provides services, be aware that solicitations for services normally require a written proposal. I say 20 plus pages, depending upon the size of the solicitation and what information the government wants in order to decide who's going to win the contract. You could say 20 up to 100, 200, sometimes 500, rarely more than that. Typically, you're going to have 3 different volumes. You're going to have a technical volume where you're going to talk about how you're going to perform the service. And that may or may not include a section on your management. You're going to have one on past performance. The government wants to know, tell me where you've done similar work before for the work that we're asking you to write a proposal on. Does not have to be government past performance, although that's generally better. Can be commercial. And then you're going to have a volume where you're either going to provide information on your price, or if it's a cost contract, they're going to want you to discuss cost and how you arrived at that cost. Let me tell you up front, if your grammar is poor, you know, you were sick every day for English class, way back in high school or college or whatever, you're at a very severe disadvantage. A poorly written proposal, especially grammar, destroys your P-win, your probability of win. Plus, you're also going to destroy your company reputation. And I'm going to show you something in a minute. Now, a little bit about past performance. I've talked about the fact it's to tell the government where you've done similar work before and for whom. Past performance is typically what I call a negative discriminator, because generally anybody who is a serious contender for a contract will come up with past performance citations. Typically it's at least 3, sometimes more on bigger solicitations. So everybody has past performance they can cite that's positive. If a company only had negative past performance where things didn't turn out right and the customer thought it was the company's fault, they wouldn't be submitting a proposal. One thing you can do in advance, getting ready for government contracting, is to prepare a file of draft material on past performance. And I'm going to show you a template here in a couple slides. Now for the next slide, I want to kind of introduce it before I go to it. I am going to show you an extract of a paragraph from an actual proposal that a company had submitted, and I've changed the names of the company in there to protect them, along with their, they had a joint venture, so they had another company involved with them. And this was a Department of State solicitation for guard services for an embassy in Spain. And the company did not win, and they sent me the proposal and asked me if I could tell them why they didn't win. They had hired a company to write the proposal for them. And lo and behold, the company that wrote the proposal submitted it to the government on their behalf without ever letting them review it. Well, I think by this lead-in, you can sort of get the idea that the Titanic hit the iceberg. So I want you all to take about a minute, and I'm going to put my timer for about a minute, and I want you to read this extract. And then you can say, thank goodness this isn't me.
I can't hear Bill anymore.
I'm letting people read, Jill.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right, got it.
Got about 20 more seconds. Okay. Well, hopefully everybody has finished reading. If you haven't, you've probably gotten the gist of it. Let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, this paragraph was in the first 3 or 4 pages of the proposal. And this was not an isolated example. I found numerous examples throughout the proposal that looked and read just like this. You know, it looks kind of like a rough draft. There was rampant poor grammar throughout. There were lots of misspellings elsewhere. And a lot of times the government will review your proposals on, you know, from a file, and, you know, review them on their computer. And so, you know, in Microsoft Word, when you have a misspelling, it'll highlight it in red underline. Well, you would see that misspellings in paragraph headings with red underlines. So that really makes it really stand out. There were sections that were poorly formatted, where there were extra lines between lines of text in a paragraph. There was nonsensical text, which I think you saw some of that in there. So what does the government conclude when they see something like this? I'll tell you, from having been in the government and reviewed and evaluated proposals, my conclusion is it's a sloppy, half-baked effort. And the first thing I say to myself is, do I want this company who gave me such a sloppy proposal to work for us? Because if they do sloppy work on their proposal, what kind of work do you think they're going to do on the contract? And do I want this company to represent my agency? And unfortunately, that's the feedback I had to give back to the company. And I told them, you know, quite frankly, usually the government evaluators, they'll talk to their people in other departments and whatnot. I said, you may find it very difficult to get any work from the State Department in this area, especially for 4 or 5 years. I mean, this is your reputation, folks. And imagine if you were the president of this company that had this proposal submitted in your behalf. You know, the next time you go to a government industry conference, would you want to be wearing the name tag and badge of that company and introduce yourself to the government as the president of XXXX? Don't think so. So think about this. Now, I told you I was going to talk to you about a past performance template. And here is a template that I have that is typical, that's used in proposals. But I will say, whatever information you submit in a proposal to include past performance, go to, in the federal RFP or RFQ, go to what's called Section L, also known as the Instruction to Offers, and they will tell you when you're submitting your past performance, just like the rest of your proposal, they will tell you what information they want, and they will even tell you in most cases how it has to be formatted, how long it has to be, the font size, margins, etc. But in general, most of the time, and this is something you can create for every example that you have that's within the last 3 years, the name, if there was a name of the contract, uh, the contract task number, if there was some particular identifying number on the contract that you had, the value of the work you did, and if it's ongoing, it's going to be the value to date, the period of performance. When did you start? When did it end? Or it could be, you know, the start date and ongoing. The name of the person that the government can call to verify your work. Their email address, their phone number and fax number. Have a discussion section in there to describe the work that you performed. Don't skimp on details in this area, because a lot of times you're going to go back to this material. Maybe you've put it together a year ago. And one of the techniques you're going to use when you're writing a proposal is you're going to want to align the past performance so that it looks as closely as it can like you have done the task that they are seeking you to write a proposal on. So when the government evaluates your past performance, they read it and say, you know, we're asking these people to basically develop schedules for our acquisition program. And they've submitted a past performance citation where they've done scheduling work for this other office. You know, lo and behold, you know, these guys have done it before. They've actually done before the same work that we are asking them to do in this proposal. So therefore, it gives the government confidence that you know how to do this. Also, if you used any particular tools, make sure you document the tools that you used and even the version number. Because a lot of times the government will tell you, we want you to use this particular tool, you know, version number X. And you may say, well, you know, my past performance, I've used, you know, 2 versions after X. Well, usually there's most of the time there's backward compatibility. So the government will conclude, well, shoot, if they performed this same work on a version that was two versions ahead, they can probably go back 2 versions and still be successful. So this may end up to be kind of a lengthy draft material. That's fine, because then you may get to the past performance requirement in the RFP and they say, limit it to only 1 page. It's a heck of a lot easier to cut something down than to add to it, especially something that's a year or 2 old that was written by Fred in your company. And oh, by the way, you have a question now and you look around and Fred doesn't work for your company anymore. Well, now you got a problem. So it's better to have too much material, too much information in your draft and cut it down than be looking for ways to fill it up after the fact. The next section, how did your work benefit the customer? What was the value? What was the payoff? And lastly, kind of what problems and challenges did you encounter? And what did you do to fix or mitigate the issue? And most federal contracts will have problems. In almost every case, it's not the total fault of the government and it's not the total fault of the contractor. Usually both parties get themselves into whatever mess they have. So evaluators and contracting officers are used to seeing this. But what's going to be important that you talk about in your past performance citation, we had this problem that was caused by these reasons. When we identified the problem, we contacted the contracting officer. We told him what the problem was. We told him what the impact was. We gave the contracting officer a mitigation plan as to how we were going to overcome or mitigate the problem, and it was resolved. That's a much better story to tell. And as far as being ready for government contracting, if you have a contract where, you know, you literally did stub your toe, get that information out to the government in advance, because it's a heck of a lot better when you're talking to the contracting officer or the government functional personnel before the RFP is released, and tell them, you know, when y'all do your evaluation of past performance and you go around and ask other people, you know, my company, you're going to hear about this one contract. Yeah, we didn't do well on that. This was the problem. This is what we did wrong. And this is what I've done as the company president or division manager or whatnot to prevent this from happening again. That's a heck of a lot better story to tell than to try to cover it up and then submit your proposal and have somebody from the evaluation team find it and go running into the room and tell all the rest of the evaluators, look at what I just found out about XYZ company and how they screwed up this contract. So the old adage of bad news doesn't get better with age is definitely true. Now, the system for award management. It's required if you want to receive a federal contract. Some of the issues that we've seen. Your registration that you do for your company with the Secretary of State and Dun & Bradstreet and then in the SAM system must agree. GSA is very precise when they're looking at the company ownership and registration, and they will look at that. We've seen companies in their SAM registration add North American Industrial Classification System codes and product service codes or federal supply codes for capabilities or things that you want to sell. Add the ones that you have, not what you'd like to have. When you register, you may receive an email from the DLA Cage Code office asking you to verify some information and asking you questions. If you get such an email, you must respond within 3 business days, or else they will take your submission and move it back to work in progress status. And when it goes into work in process, that means the ball is back in your court and they aren't acting on it. Now, the General Services Administration is the agency that processes the SAM registrations. They're currently experiencing a pretty good delay, so plan accordingly. Don't submit your SAM registration 2 days before you submit the proposal. Because, oh, by the way, depending on how quickly the contracting officer moves to award the contract, your SAM registration may not be active by the time the contracting officer wants to make an award. And if you're not active in SAM, you're not eligible to receive a federal contract. After you're active, then go back and complete what's called your dynamic small business search profile, which contracting officers use as a source, not the only source, but a source when they're doing market research on companies that might be able to satisfy and perform a new contract for the government. And the DSBS, as it's called, will extract information from an active SAM registration to start populating some of the fields in the DSBS. Now, if you're going to contract for goods, many of the solicitations in the Department of Defense require registration on the Defense Logistics Agency, known as DLA, their internet bid board system called DIBS. And there is the URL. An active SAM registration and receipt of your cage, what's called your cage code, is a prerequisite to DIBS registration. Approval is not automatic and requires a few weeks to process just for your registration. Then you're in the DIBS system, but lo and behold, you know, before you can manufacture parts for the Defense Logistics Agency for like weapon system parts, you say, gee, you know, I'd like to be able to see the drawings. So you need approval to access the engineering drawings, which is called, in DLA, is called their C folders. This is a separate action that has to be taken. And there's the link to what's called their product data management repository. And at the bottom of that web page, there is a phone number for the help desk. And their help desk is located out in Ogden, Utah. You can call them, explain to them you're a new DIBS user, you want to get access to the C folders, and I've found them to be very helpful working with businesses to help get access. Now there's another layer to this, because some of the drawings in DIBS are export controlled items, and they require special handling on your part. And so it requires approval from a joint certification program that's run by the US and Canada. And you can Google the joint certification program, and it will take you through the process and the forms you need to fill out and submit. This is definitely not a fast process. Matter of fact, if you're starting from scratch now with registering in DIBS and then getting approval to see the C folders, and then you do need to get approval by the joint certification program, I would say, depending on timing and luck and whatnot, you may be looking at anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks before you finally get all these approvals and ability to see drawings and have the ability to see the export control drawings. So put that into your planning timeline. Now, typically with DLA and bidding on DIBS, price is the primary or maybe the only criteria. But DLA also does consider past performance. They have their own database where they track their vendors, how they've performed in terms of quality and how they've performed in terms of schedule. If you have negative annotations in their past performance database, it will definitely hurt you. We do have a seminar upcoming on the 4th of November that you can sign up for on how to do business with DLA. We've talked a little bit about DIBS. I'll just tell you that I found it not to be easy to use, nor is it very intuitive. But there are some help resources that exist. DLA runs a seminar. Lately, it's been done as a webinar 3 to 4 times a year called Training, Knowledge, and Opportunities, or TKO. You can sign up for that seminar if you go to the DIBS webpage, and even before you log in, if you go to the bottom, toward the bottom of the page, they'll have a section on DLA small business programs. You can select the small business office for DLA Land and Maritime, which is over in Columbus. It will bring up their webpage, and then there'll be a link in the middle of the page for the Training, Knowledge, and Opportunities seminars. You can click on that, and then it will eventually lead you to where you can sign up for some of their seminars. And I believe they have one upcoming in early November. And when I checked the other day, it was still open. I will tell you these seminars are pretty comprehensive. They will give you a basic tools to be able to navigate the DIBS system. The seminar does take all day, and I will tell you it is generally death by PowerPoint. So have your coffee pot next to you for the webinar, or Red Bull or whatever you need, because you're gonna be there all day. DLA will also offer seminars on specific topics. Some of them are a subset of the TKO. So if you want to go back and just hear more about something they covered in TKO in one area, you can sign up for a seminar, one of those seminars. DIBS also has an online help. You can also go to YouTube and look for videos. My only caution there is check for currency, because some of the videos out on YouTube could be a few years old and things do change. And lastly, if you need help with DIBS, contact your PTAC and work with your PTAC counselor. Now, let's say you're looking for a contract with the state of Ohio. Here's the link to the website. And one of the tabs on that website is you can register as a vendor with the state. That's going to be
Hey,
one
Bill,
of your first steps. Yes.
Bill, we had a request to go over what some of the acronyms mean on the prior screen.
On this one?
It just says, could you go over some of these acronyms? I think so. Melissa, do you want to expand a little bit? Do you mean the Defense Internet Bid Board System, or DIBS? Yes, yes, that's what she said.
Okay. Well, the Defense Logistics Agency buys a lot of their weapon system parts and commodities on their own procurement system called the DLA Internet Bid Board System, DIBS. And there is the URL that will take you to DIBS. And the DLA drawings are in it's in a system they call their C folders. And it's known generically as their product data management repository. And there is the URL that will take you to the C folders. And I think I defined there the Joint Certification Program, JCP, run by the US and Canada. So if there's some other acronyms that you want me to expound upon, let me know. And I guess we'll go look at the chat at the end. As far as the state of Ohio, there's a lot of other information on this website. You can search for opportunities. There are links to the certification, and we'll talk about certification in a little bit. Socioeconomic certifications. MBE is the Minority Business Enterprise certification, and EDGE is encouraging diversity, growth, and equity, which is for generally people of social disadvantage, and to include women-owned small business. And we do have a seminar upcoming on people wanting to do business with the state of Ohio, and that is going to be on the 10th of November. I'm trying to tie in all these seminars for you to let you know when they're coming. If you want to do business with local government, and this varies greatly. My best advice for you, if you're going to want to do business with local government, you need to engage with that entity and become familiar with their registration and process. And it varies wildly. The volume of opportunities that they have are generally smaller, and the opportunities are usually smaller, but that may lead to less competition. I didn't say no competition, but less competition. But one thing I will tell you is you will find that local entities like cities, for example, typically will give a preference to businesses that are located within their jurisdiction. And that kind of makes sense. So just be aware of that, and that may be something that will give you an advantage, or something that you need to think about, how do I overcome that? And you really are going to have to find out, how do they conduct their bidding? And it really, really varies. Now, who buys what you sell? Is it the federal government? Is it state? Is it local? Is it 2 of 3, all 3 of 3? There is some websites you can use for market research. In the federal, there are some databases on USA spending where you can see what the government has spent in previous fiscal years. There are award notices in what's called the Beta SAM system. And Beta SAM is a migration of several different systems that the federal government has. One of them, the main one, used to be the Federal Business Opportunities webpage. We are having a webinar on Beta SAM that you can sign up for on the 22nd of October. There are market research tools out there that you can subscribe to that are kind of pricey. I will tell you that your PTAC counselor has access to 2 of those tools, and we can do research on our clients' behalf and provide them the results from that research. The state of Ohio procurement, you can go to their website and you can look for current contracts. And once again, for local government, it varies by municipality, and that information may be easy or difficult to find. I will tell you that state and local government will typically buy manufactured parts from either the original manufacturer, the OEM, or through a distributor. They generally will not go and issue a solicitation for a widget. And state and local governments do not main inventories in general. They may have a small number on hand, but they won't provision parts for, let's say, a road grader, and have parts generally on hand to completely rebuild a road grader, versus where the federal government might have an inventory they would keep for parts to repair aircraft, tanks, or ships. Some other market research sources that you can use. Trade association events. You can make introductions, have follow-on appointments with government and prime contractors. One of the biggest challenges I always tell all my new clients wanting to get into government procurement, your biggest challenge is nobody knows who the heck you are and what you sell. So you're going to have to spend an awful lot of time up front just networking. And you're going to do it till you wear out holes in the soles of your shoes. You can go to industry day events especially for opportunities that you might not be interested in, but they might be related to what you do. Because that way you'll have an opportunity to meet different companies. Once again, the networking. You can get referrals from other meetings where you can hopefully get appointments in the federal with small business offices. PTAC can give you some referrals, and also through the PTAC bid match. You can start, say, looking at award notices. And from award notices, if you start noticing a pattern where it seems like in this one area or this one agency over time, these one or two companies seem to be winning a majority of the work, well, then maybe you want to go try to have a meeting with that company. Because if they are winning the contracts, they must be doing something right. Something else for you to consider when you're getting into government contracting. When does the government buy? Look for patterns based upon market research you do. Do they make regular purchases relatively evenly spaced throughout the year? Do they seem to buy the product or service you sell towards just the end of the fiscal year? You know, if you're a machine shop and they're getting ready to deploy a new weapon system, they will typically have an initial parts buy to provision a new weapon supply chain. Or do they have large one-time buys in response to a specific need, i.e. COVID? And, you know, a lot of us can remember over the last few months, initially when the COVID crisis hit, there was a huge effort expended to try to procure PPE, personal protective equipment. And there was all sorts of contracting done, and agencies were doing all sorts of market research to find sources. So that's an example of a one-time buy. Now, if you do manufacture parts, the DIB system provides procurement history data by national stock number, or NSN. and it will show you the date of the last sale, the quantity, and the total price. And of course, from that, you can come up with a price per item. So Dibs does some of that work for you. Now, a mistake that some new companies make, and you need to understand up front, the regulations, laws, and rules are different. The federal has its own laws and regulations on procurement. So does each state. And then within each local government, they can have different laws, rules, and regulations. This is frustrating for you because, in effect, if you sell to multiple levels of government, you've got to learn and understand multiple rules. And my bottom bullet there about demonstrating ignorance, don't be talking to a state of Ohio contracting officer in terms of the federal acquisition regulation, because it doesn't apply to the state contracting officer, and they don't care. And because you're talking to them in terms of the federal acquisition regulation, they already know that you don't know what you're talking about. And if you don't know what you're talking about, it goes back to the same question again. Do I want to buy anything from this company? It hurts your reputation, folks. So when you walk into a meeting, know whose rules you are operating under. Then how does the government buy? Learn the process. In the federal, it has the most formal and structured process. Solicitations in general over $25,000 require formal advertisement, typically in Beta SAM. But there are other sites exist. GSA, the General Services Administration, has its own site. Another site that's used, I've seen used, is called FedConnect. There are other examples. For solicitations over 10,000 but less than 25, the contracting officer will perform market research on their own, and they will identify at least 3 bidders and then solicit them for proposals. So therefore, if you think that the government's going to release a solicitation, the federal government, and it's going to fall in this price range, it would behoove you to find out who the contracting officer is and do some upfront marketing with that contracting officer so that they will know that you are a source, and hopefully you'll be at least one of the 3 that sent the RFP or RFQ. If they don't know about you, they may not find you. For requirements under 10,000, and there are some exceptions, agency functional personnel can use purchase cards. And once again, they're supposed to perform market research and get 3 quotes. Purchase card procurement is the least formal method. There are fewer regulations, but there are restrictions on what can be purchased. Now, there is a big difference in federal between solicitations and purchase cards, and that will impact about how you market to the government. And there is going to be a PTAC webinar on the 29th of October on marketing to the government. We mentioned earlier that the government does have contract vehicles for multiple award contracts. These are pre-competed contract vehicles. There was lots of competition to win them. They're very long, a long and drawn out process. They're hard and expensive to win and requires lots of past performance. These are not for the faint of heart. We will talk about socioeconomic set-asides briefly, so please hold your questions for a couple slides. For the state of Ohio, once again, I give you the website. There are several links on the page that will lead you to a wealth of information. The state, we talked about their socioeconomic certifications for MBE and EDGE. I've got a little more in a couple slides about that. The state will also use large pre-competed contract vehicles called state term schedules and master maintenance agreements. The state will also have purchase cards that their agency personnel can use. Now, once again, for the local governments, which are your cities, counties, townships, villages, and I don't know if there's some other nomenclatures out there. Once again, to foot stomp, you've got each entity can have a different process. They could use websites to advertise their needs. They might advertise them in the local newspaper, or they could post the advertisement in a government building with a notice that you have to request the RFP in order to receive it. They can use evaluation panels to decide who they're going to award to. In some entities that are relatively smaller, the council members for the city council or board of aldermen or select people, whoever are the elected officials, can decide who gets the award. It may be delegated to the city manager or city engineer. It varies greatly. It does help to meet with the local officials in advance, not only to gain their trust, but to make them aware that your company exists and what services and products that you can provide. Now, going back to those socioeconomic certifications, they will exist at all three levels of government. And at each level, they are unique. So if you go to a federal contracting officer and tell them that you are State of Ohio MBE or EDGE certified, they could care less. It has no meaning for them on a federal solicitation. Now, some good news for you. Some of the Ohio local governments are adopting a reciprocal certification with the state of Ohio. As an example, if you are certified in the state as an MBE or EDGE certified, it gives you reciprocal certification with the Dayton local certification called the PEP program. And the good news here for that is this means less paperwork for business to apply for all the different certifications. I will tell you on certifications that eligibility requirements vary, and Jill is going to tell you some about that in her presentation. The federal government will use the 8A, which is for disadvantaged minorities, the women-owned small business, the hub zone called the historically underutilized business zone, and the service disabled veteran-owned small business. And the VA and FAA are the only two federal agencies that will occasionally use the veteran-owned small business certification. In Jill's presentation, and I won't steal her thunder, She may also tell you that right now there are 2 certification paths for a service-disabled veteran-owned small business. There is the formal certification process that the VA has, and then you can also just register in SAM and declare yourself to be a service-disabled veteran-owned small business. Previously, the VA was required, the VA and FAA required you to use their formal certification process. And the other federal agencies would accept your self-assertion. Those processes are merging. And eventually the SBA will be in charge of the process, but all service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses and veteran-owned small businesses will need to complete the VA's certification process. And I think I stated that correctly. As we mentioned, the state of Ohio uses the MBE and EDGE, and local governments vary. The government will set opportunities aside for companies with specific certifications. For example, the federal government will set an opportunity aside so only women-owned small businesses can compete for it. Or the state of Ohio will say, this opportunity is set aside so only the businesses certified in the minority business enterprise can compete for it. I will tell you though, on federal solicitations that are full and open, meaning that small business and large business can bid on it, typically the contracting officer will include requirements in the RFP requiring the large business to subcontract out so much of the work to small business. And typically there's a percentage for the various socioeconomic certifications that the federal government uses.
Excuse me, quick question.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. So, in looking at those companies who are required to make subcontracts, or I should say these prime contractors being required to make subcontracts, are we able to find that information based on the contract from the GSA and Fed Connect?
Typically, it won't be in the GSA, it'll be in Beta SAM, and it'll be a full and open solicitation. And if they haven't released the solicitation yet, if they're still in pre-solicitation stage, perhaps they've posted a draft solicitation. The draft solicitation will have the subcontracting requirements listed in it.
Okay. Thank you.
And typically it'll say that a large business, receiving this contract will need to subcontract out X percentage to the various socioeconomic groups. And it's up to the contracting officer to define what those percentages are. So that's typically where you will find it.
Thanks for clearing that up.
Now, some big mistakes I see companies making with certifications. They will help you get a contract, but they're not a contract award token. It's not like you get certified as a hub zone company and then you get a token and you just deposit it with the contracting officer and a contract pops out. It doesn't work that way. You win contracts competitively by having capabilities that an agency needs to achieve its mission, or you can supply parts or commodities. You have past performance that proves your ability to deliver, and you have competitive pricing. I will tell you from past experience in the federal government that contracting officers and also prime contractors really dislike business with an entitlement attitude. Businesses that show up, you know, saying, I'm certified as and you pick the socioeconomic certification. Where's my contract? Get all the certifications you're entitled to, but only when you're ready to take advantage of them. And Jill may highlight this in her presentation. Too many times I see companies wanting to get started in government procurement, and the first thing they want to do before they can even spell government procurement is go out and get their 8A certification. Well, the 8A certification has a 9-year period that you can be in the 8A program. And it may take you 2 or 3 years to learn how to spell government procurement and what it means to win a contract and how the process works. So if you run out and get your certification right off the bat, you will in effect have wasted maybe up to maybe 1/3 of your time in the program learning how to spell government procurement. So kind of now what? Well, the process to become ready is not a 3-day effort, folks. It requires planning, patient research, and perseverance. When you're ready to pursue government opportunities, when you've gotten all your ducks lined up, you're going to want to contact agencies that might buy your product or service. If it's federal, you want to start with your federal small business office. Do not ignore trade association events where you can do a lot of networking. AFCEA, the Armed Forces Communications Electronics Association. If you're in construction, the Society of American Military Engineers, there's logistics associations, etc. The matchmakers are a good opportunity, especially once eventually we go back and we do these again in person. Meetings with prime contractors. Meet with your PTAC. Let them advise you. The bottom line is kind of network, network, network. Now, I've been talking here for, well, going on almost an hour and a half. I've covered a lot of ground today, and I've only lightly touched some topics for later seminars. Preparation is essential. It's going to help you avoid a lot of frustration. It's a large time investment, but it's worth it. You foot stomped about why having a plan. Apply for your certifications. Don't use them, though, as a crutch. Advice and help is available, and I list at least 3 of the sources there. And remember, this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. So with that, I guess, Jill, should we look at the any of the questions that came in on the chat?
Yes, I can check, and I don't see anything on there now. I think you covered it all. But it's a lot of information, and hopefully it was helpful. I feel like I learn something every time I partner with you, Bill. So thank you.
Well, should I bring up your slides then?
Yes.
Hold on, let me stop sharing for a second.
And I can't, I turned my video on, but I don't see myself. So I don't know if anyone else is able to see me either.
I see you, Jill.
Okay, thank you.
I see you.
All right, Sharon Smith, hello.
Hello.
Okay, we're going to go through this fairly quickly today because all right, can I have a sample capability statement in a past performance sheet? So Sharon Hopkins, is that something that we can send out to people?
Yeah, so we have, on the camera now, we actually have a capability statement seminar coming up that would be probably wonderful for someone to go to, especially if they're not familiar with them. But if they want to send me an email requesting the capability template, we can get that out to them.
Okay, and that's, Bill, that's October, what day did you say that was?
October 27th.
Okay. The full listing of webinars is on the Ohio Business Matchmaker website. As Bill mentioned, we do have a lot of webinars left that go a little bit deeper into the topics that Bill discussed today. So I am going to talk about SBA's small business programs, and we intentionally had this presentation go after Bill because of what Bill was mentioning. So many times we have businesses that focus on certification first and then business development later after. And really, it should be the opposite way. You should be focusing on your business development first, conducting market research in government to figure out which level of government is right for you, because businesses spend a lot of time pursuing certifications without really understanding government procurement. So they might be a service disabled 8A woman-owned small business located in a hub zone that's never gotten a contract. And PTAC helps immensely getting to know the sites that Bill was mentioning, like Beta, SAM, GSA. Understanding those things will help you in the business development part of government contracting. Next slide, please. This is my contact information. It's definitely either way you can reach me, but email is always, I think, the best because that gives you an opportunity to really expand on what you're asking for. And a lot of times I might have to do research for you because some of the regulations aren't clear. I sometimes don't know the answer. So having it written out, then I can forward it to other people within SBA for information. But we have a question, and I just see that a request for debrief. Okay, Bill, do you want to talk about debrief real quick, like requesting a debrief on a contract?
Sure. You can request a debrief once you are notified you're unsuccessful within 10 days after you've been notified you're
That's okay.
You're unsuccessful.
Well, and it's really specific on what the contracting officer will discuss in the debrief. It's outlined in the FAR. I can't remember which FAR clause talks about debrief, but it goes into detail about what the contracting officer can tell you and what you can expect. So I can research that one.
Yeah, it does. And the other point I'd like to make is, a lot of times contracting officers come into the debrief with a lot of trepidation because they're feeling that, you're only there asking for a debrief so you can figure out how to file a protest. And so consequently, they're very nervous. And so they're inclined to only give you exactly what the FAR says they have to give you and nothing else. But if you set the contracting officer at ease, and if there's a program team involved, and say, look, I'm interested in getting a debrief because maybe this was the first proposal we ever submitted. And we want to get better. So, can you tell me where I did well, and can tell me, you know, where y'all found we were lacking and how we could improve? You'll put the contracting officer and the program office at ease, and I guarantee you will get a better debrief and you will get much better information.
I agree. The more that you're able to tell them your purposes for the debrief, the more productive it'll be. Okay, and this, my presentation is very different from Bill's. So we're going to take off the marketing, the getting started hat, and really take a deeper dive into like the small business programs and how they can help you in terms of getting a slight competitive advantage in government contracting. So this isn't the first, I mean, this may not be the first time you've heard about the small business programs, and it probably won't be the last. I think the more that we're able to touch on these topics, the more it starts to make sense. I've been doing government procurement related things since 2008. I was with PTAC for 5 years prior to starting with the SBA. So there's still a lot that I'm learning. So you're in good hands with this group, but also know that we will let you know if we don't know something. So next slide, please.
Hold on, Jill, I'm having an issue here.
No problem.
What it is. Well, let me stop sharing and share again.
And I see a comment about identifying differentiators. We're going to go into more depth on that with a capability statement training that I think is October 27th, correct, Bill?
On capability statement, yes,
Okay.
27 October.
Okay.
And for some reason, mine does not want to advance your slides. I don't know why.
It's just, you know, it's so intuitive. No one really needs to
There
hear
it is.
Okay.
There it is.
Okay. So within the SBA, the SBA is responsible for the implementation and management of 3 key programs. The SBA also has regulations around the veteran-owned small business program, but that is administered by the VA. As Bill mentioned, they are working to transition the veteran-owned small business program over to the SBA, but they've been working on transitioning that since I started with the SBA in 2012. So I'm not sure when that will actually take place. So many of you getting started in this in federal government, and again, this is just for federal government, as Bill mentioned, the cities and state of Ohio, they have their own small business programs in certifications that are only for those particular levels of government. So when I speak on the 3 programs that are listed here, it is just for federal contracts. Okay, so I will touch on the 8A program, Hub Zone, and the Women-Owned Small Business Program. Each of these programs could have their own hour-long webinar, but we aren't going to do that today. We're just going to do a higher level, a broad overview of all 3. Next slide, please. So just by doing business with the government, 23% of all business is set aside for small business. One of the most common questions I get at the district office, and also when I work for PTAC, is from businesses that will tell me, I'm just a small business. I'm not 8A, I'm not Hub Zone, I'm not any of those things. I'm not woman-owned. Are there opportunities for me? Yes, there are, because there are 23% of all business is set aside for small business. In fact, over the years, I've been seeing more total small business set-asides go out rather than specifically Hub Zone, specifically woman-owned, because if, for example, you are a woman-owned small business and you bid on a small business set aside, the government gets credit still for the woman-owned small business designation. So just by being a small business, there are still opportunities for you. But I also want to say that you don't get a competitive advantage if you're bidding on a total small business set aside and you happen to also be a woman-owned small business. That doesn't give you an advantage. They'll still be looking for technical capability. So in the federal government, inside of that 23%, 5% goes to, we call it the small disadvantaged business, but that's really the 8A program. 3% is designated to service disabled veteran-owned small business, 5% to women-owned small business, and 3% to hub zone, or historically underutilized business owned. Next slide, please. We touched on that. Go ahead and go. All right, so I'm going to talk about the 8A program, and it is really the number 8 and A in parentheses, because that is where it shows up in the Small Business Act. Number A, 8A. Okay, so I see a question, company has a DBE/hub zone. So that's a very good question because it just talks to the confusion of these programs. So DBE is the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, and that is only for the Department of Transportation. So the Department of Transportation would cover airports, regional transit authorities like COTA, and I'm missing one, I can't remember, but it's all of the transit authorities. So DBE is a completely separate program because they get federal and state funding. So Hub Zone is a federal program. So Hub Zone would just be for federal contracts. So many firms find that DBE is helpful if they have a customer base with the Department of Transportation. Next slide, please. I will say I get a lot of questions about the 8A program. Oh, thank you. DBE covers, oh, Lisa, you're with the Department of Transportation. Awesome, I'm glad you're on there. DBE covers highway transportation. All right, Lisa Washington just chatted. She's with the Department of Transportation. So any of you that have questions, it's awesome that she's on. So you could probably chat her a couple of questions. Okay, 8A, get a lot of questions about 8A, as Bill mentioned. And in fact, I love talking about the 8A program. I love to see firms that are ready for the 8A program. But what I like to say is just because you can doesn't mean you should right now. Because 8A is the only small business program that the SBA has that has an end date. So 9 years, all right? It's on that slide, 9 years. Firms will say, oh, well, 9 years is a long time. It's not. I'll have you talk to any of the 8A firms that are about to graduate now. They all want to stay in the program because you have to give yourself time as a business to learn about federal procurement, because 8A does not guarantee you a contract. The SBA is in charge of implementing the program and making sure that participants remain compliant with SBA regulations. So I am a business opportunity specialist. I work primarily with firms that are certified in the 8A program. The SBA does not get contracting opportunities from federal agencies. That work is done by the firm. So all of the work that you can do up front, and this is for all of the programs, it will definitely help you down the road. So 8A has a 9-year participation time frame. A company can only participate in the program once, and the disadvantaged individual upon whom eligibility is based can only participate in the program once. So what that means is if you are a disadvantaged individual, you get your company certified in the 8A program, you go through the 9 years, you sell your company. That company still has been in the 8A program, so the new owners can't apply for 8A under that same business. And likewise for the disadvantaged individual, if the disadvantaged individual decides to form a new business, they can't use their status as a disadvantaged individual to apply for 8A for that new company. So keep that in mind. It's important to keep that in your, just to know that up front. So it is a business development program. It's the only one of the small business programs that is, and I'm talking so much more than I thought I would. It's already 11:45. So, and business development means when you get into the program, you have to create a business plan. You have to let business opportunity specialists like me know what it is that you're intending to do over the next 9 years so that we can provide assistance in helping you reach those goals. Next slide, please. Okay, so there are 2 stages to 8A. There's a developmental stage and a transitional stage. So in years 1 through 4, firms are eligible to receive up to 100% of their total revenues from 8A. So that means you could essentially, as a business, have all 8A work those first 4 years. But as it's a government program, the regulations were designed to keep small businesses from becoming overly reliant on the program. So starting in year 5, the regulations start weaning companies off of 8A. So like, for example, in year 5, you can't have any more than 85% of your total revenue from 8A. Then in year 6, it goes to 75%, and then 7, 65%, 8, 55%. So by the time you graduate from the 8A program in year 9, you can't have any more than 45% of your total revenue from 8A. But what I like to tell all firms, don't ever plan to have 100% of your revenue from 8A. You just don't want to do that because you're just going to hurt yourself when you hit year 5. So what the regulations ask us to do is in year 5, if say 90% of total revenue is from 8A in year 5 when it should be 85%, then we have to suspend companies from getting sole source contracts, which is really the whole purpose of and the benefit of the 8A program. So not all of it, there's still 8A competitive, but next slide, please. Okay, so just eligibility requirements for 8A, 51% owned and controlled by US citizens who are both socially and economically disadvantaged. For the PTACs that are on the webinar, just note that the personal net worth upon entry into the 8A program has increased to $750,000. Okay, the SBA is aligning that personal net worth with the woman-owned small business program. So it's now $750,000 to get in, and $750,000 net worth that you have to maintain while in the program. So in addition to being economically disadvantaged, the firm must also be socially disadvantaged. Social disadvantage means belonging to one of 4 key designated groups, including African American, Native American, Asian American, or Hispanic American. So if you don't belong to one of those 4 key designated groups, you can still apply for 8A for the social disadvantage. You just have to complete a preponderance of evidence of how you have faced discrimination or hardship in the areas of education, employment, or access to capital. So if you wanted more information on that, because I don't think we have can I get the next slide, please? If you go to sba.gov and then click on 8A or type in 8A, you will see that it goes into more detail. So within the 8A program, once a firm is certified 8A and they have had their business plan approved, that firm is then eligible for sole source contracts. They just increased the threshold last week. So it used to be 4 million, now it's 4.5 million for sole source. 7.5 million for manufacturing, 4.5 for services, and then 8A competitive contracts would be anything that's 4.5 million or above. Okay, When we say sole source, it means that in 13 CFR 124, there is authority for 8A participants to receive sole source contracts. That means that, say, Health and Human Services or the Centers for Disease Control, for example, they're like, oh, I really love ABC company and they're in the 8A program. Per 13 CFR 124, they can direct award to ABC company. So that is the sole source authority. I will say within the 8A program that the sole source authority operates differently than with a woman-owned small business program and the Hub Zone program. Under 8A, federal agencies can award sole source without justification. That means they can say, I like this company. They provided a technically responsible capability statement. They responded to the source of sought notification. They look like they're going to be a great candidate. They can award them directly. With a woman-owned small business or Hub Zone, they have to provide justification, which is a really in-depth paperwork exercise that a lot of contracting officers don't want to have to do. And sometimes they can't justify two equally technically capable companies why one should get it over another. So within 8A, they don't have to do that. With the other ones, they do. Okay, so 8A competitive contracts means that this contract will show up on Beta SAM, but only 8A companies can submit proposals on them. So other benefits of the 8A program are the All Small Mentor Protege program, which is open to all small business now. And that's...
Excuse me, Jill?
Yes.
I'm going to ask questions. Sorry to jump in.
Sure.
Throughout the, obviously, 8A program, are there any kind of waivers for any of the requirements? So say you somewhat meet the requirement, but you don't meet it all the way. So say, for example, you've been in business for 2 years, but you haven't been making money, for example.
There is a waiver, but I always, if the business has not made any money, it's going to be very difficult for that business to be competitive in federal contracts. So there's a waiver. There's 5 conditions that have to be met, meaning well, one of them is you have to have done some business. It can't be a company that's had no business at all. And the owner,
This is an example.
no, because we want businesses to have success, you know, and I understand that is a good question. And in fact, SBA is talking about doing away with the 2-year waiver, the 2-year requirement of being in business. The challenge that I see with that is because of the size of federal contracts. If a company doesn't really have high revenue, it's going to be hard for that company to support $1 million contract. So if that company has access to capital, has like a line of credit or potential teaming partners that can help with capital infusion if it's needed, that might be something else. But yes, there is a 2-year waiver. I can send it to you. It's if you email me, I'd be happy to do that.
Oh, okay.
Right, next slide, please. Okay, so that's really all I have on, that was short and sweet on 8A. As I mentioned, I think that I'll tell you, every single 8A company that comes into the Columbus district office, there's 2 of us in the district office that work with 8A companies. So my colleague Shonda Harris and I, the first thing we do is recommend they start working with PTAC. Because PTAC can provide bid match service. The PTACs have experience with proposal submission. They don't write the proposal for you, but they will help you break it down. Hey, this is what this means. And Bill does a couple of, at least twice a year on how to submit a federal proposal. So all of those things are really important. So quickly, let's take off 8A hat and put on Hub Zone. Next slide, please. There have been major changes to Hub Zone and Woman-Owned this year. So I did a Hub Zone presentation with Bill, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago. But this just talks a little bit about what the program is. And with HubZone, the eligibility requirements are totally different than 8A. And there's no minimum time in business to apply for HubZone. And it's a 3% set aside. So HubZone stands for Historically Underutilized Business Zone. And it's a very black and white program. It's designed to help companies it's designed to help companies that are located in these areas gain contracting opportunities. So HubZone areas are usually areas of low household income, high unemployment, or both. And SBA doesn't have their own set of matrix for HubZone. They use HUD, like they use Housing and Urban Development and a couple of other reports to determine HubZone areas. So it's not perfect. Next slide, please. Before I go off on a tangent, I want to see what, okay. So this HubZone map here, when I said that HubZone is black and white, it is. So the best way to find out if you're the main qualifications for HubZone is that your principal office must be located in a HubZone and 35% of your employees must reside in a HubZone. So when it means principal office, that's where the greatest number of your employees work. There is only one place that I know of that you can confirm if your principal office is located in a HubZone or not. And that is by going to the HubZone map. So if you go to sba.gov, or you can follow this link here, it'll take you to the HubZone map. You plug your address in and you're either in a HubZone or you're not. And if you're not in a HubZone, you will have to move into one. Even if you can throw a rock into a HubZone, you're so close to one, if your address, and then you can also contact SBA, really. If it's that close, you can contact SBA, and they will look at that census tract to make sure. So that eligibility requirement for your principal office being located in a HubZone, that's one of those black and white, you either are or you're not. Okay, next slide, please. So as I mentioned before, SBA regulates and implements the HubZone program, also determines which businesses are eligible, and maintains a listing of qualified HubZone firms to fulfill procurement opportunities. SBA is also responsible for protests of eligibility regarding HubZone. So I will say in terms of protesting HubZone eligibility, it would only be another contractor that submitted a proposal on the same job that the HubZone business that they are protesting submitted a proposal on. So it can't be, what I'm trying to say, it can't be a member of the public that says, oh, I don't believe this firm is really HubZone certified. You have to be an interested party in order to do that. Next slide, please. Okay. So eligibility requirements, 51% owned and controlled by US citizens. The business must be small. The principal office must be located in a designated HubZone. And then 35% of employees must reside in a HubZone area. Okay, so that 35% of employees, that would be anyone that works for your business at least 40 hours a month. And there have been changes good changes to the HubZone program. And I have a couple of slides dedicated to that as we go on here. Okay, next slide, please. And I want to tell everyone in advance, I apologize profusely, but this is like the time when my kids, I'm working from home. This is when they usually walk out the door to go to school. So if you hear any noise while we're going on, that's probably them getting ready. So I apologize in advance. So, and I got a little bit of time here. Okay, so in terms of principal office, as I mentioned before, the principal office is where the greatest number of your employees work, with the exception of, for example, if you are a construction company or you are, if you have drivers, or if the majority of your employees are out performing on jobs, those employees don't count towards the principal office definition. So your principal office would be your administrative staff. So sometimes we see, for example, an office, a company that might have 2 locations. They may have one location where they have 5 people that are in administrative function that's in a hub zone, for example, and then they have a warehouse where they have 15 employees that's in another location that's not in a hub zone. In that case, they would not meet the principal office definition because they have 15 people working in a warehouse that's not in a hub zone, but 5 administrative staff that are in a hub zone. So if you had any questions about whether or not your company is located in a hub zone or what that means, you can send me an email and I can help you work through it. Next slide, please. Okay. This has changed, and the 35% still holds true. So 35% of employees residing in a hub zone. An employee to the hub zone program means anyone that works for you at least 40 hours a month. With the new regulation changes, they have created a legacy rule, meaning that if your company becomes hub zone certified, based on the 35% of employees at that time, if one of those employees was to move into a non-hub zone area, that employee would still count towards that hub zone requirement because they were in a hub zone. Now they've just moved somewhere else. You're still going to be able to count them. Okay, so that's one of the major changes. Volunteers are not considered employees. SBA defines reside is to live in a primary residence at least 180 days. And you can prove residence in various ways with a utility bill, a cable bill, or if they are a registered voter. So also with COVID, many hub zone employees were students and are students. So with COVID, students, a lot of them are now going to school from home, and they also did the same regulation for telework. So if you have a student who resides in a hub zone while they're at school, but now is being forced to attend school at home, they still count. Same with people that are teleworking. So 1090, that's a very good question, Karen. No, the question is, do 1099 employees count? Well, let me backtrack. I would say on a case-by-case basis, because if that 1099 employee is working for several people, not just you, but it has multiple people that they report to. SBA is they really don't want to count 1099 employees, but then they will, with very rare exception. It would be something that you would send to the Hub Zone Help Desk, and I'll talk about the Hub Zone Help Desk a little bit more here. Next slide, please. Okay, so really that's all I have on Hub Zone. Anything specific to Hub Zone, SBA has a great email address. It's hubzone@sba.gov. I use it all the time because it's answered by Hub Zone analysts. At the district office, of which I'm a part, we don't screen the applications. We don't approve them. That's actually done at headquarters. There's a headquarters office dedicated to Hub Zone, and that hubzone@sba.gov, that is where the real technical questions go. And often, if you reach out to me, I will forward that email over to the Hub Zone office. Sometimes that, and it shouldn't, but sometimes you can get a response faster if I'm CC'd or if I lead that email. Next slide, please. Okay, so women-owned small business. This is really having some major changes. Perhaps the most major change is that under the National Defense Authorization Act of 2015, SBA was told that they had to start certifying women-owned small business. We can't just keep we can't keep asking women-owned businesses to self-certify. So that was in 2015. It's taken 5 years, but SBA, actually today is October 15th, and I have some slides that talk about this. SBA will start certifying women-owned small businesses, and it doesn't cost anything. As it's a brand new program for SBA, however, there probably will be some hiccups, and I'm sure the PTACs are just nodding their heads as they hear me say this. So any of these major transitions take time, but just to talk about briefly the qualification requirements for women-owned small business. There's actually 2 parts to it. Okay, there is a woman-owned small business designation, and there's also an economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business designation. So this first slide is dedicated to woman-owned small business, or actually we've got them both here. I am going to have to mute myself for just a minute because my son needs to use the ice maker. As embarrassing as this is, just give me like a minute. Okay. I've never run over a webinar like this when we're when we're getting ready for school. Okay, so woman-owned small business is women are considered underrepresented, but not substantially underrepresented. So they also have to be economically disadvantaged. So I've had about 5 years to be able to say that sentence. So essentially, woman-owned small business, the NAICS codes for that, women are underrepresented, but not substantially underrepresented. For economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business, the NAICS codes are women are, well, actually I got it, the EDWOSB, women are underrepresented, but not substantially, so they must also be economically disadvantaged. So what I want you to take away from this is that for the women-owned small business program, it's based on NAICS codes. So there are some NAICS codes that participate and some that don't. So one of the best ways that you can find out is if your NAICS codes are in the program is to go to sba.gov and look at the WOSB program, and I can help you do that as well. But these program improvements should make it easier. I think it's wonderful that SBA is going to start certifying companies, and how they do that is through SBA Certify. It's certify.sba.gov. Next slide, please. So to qualify as a woman-owned small business, the company must be small, 51% owned and controlled by women, who must manage the day-to-day operations, make the long-term decisions for the business, hold the highest officer position, and dedicate full time to the business. No minimum amount of time is required in order to apply. Next slide, please. Okay, so for the economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business, in addition to all of the WOSB requirements, the personal net worth of the woman owner has to be less than $750,000. The adjusted gross income over 3 years is $350,000 or less, or the fair market value of assets is $6 million or less. So how the woman proves that is by providing tax returns to either the SBA or to one of the third-party certifiers of the woman-owned small business program. Those third-party certifiers are still going to be used even with this new certification process that the SBA has. So women can either go through a third-party certifier like the Ohio River Valley WeBank, or the I think there's 4 of them. I believe I have the slide for it, but those are still accepting applications, but they're at a cost. The SBA certification will not cost anything. Next slide, please. Okay, so starting today, and you know what? We're a little bit slow, so I'm optimistic. I'm putting October 15th. I'm hoping that SBA is, and I think they are. I think that we are ready for this. But SBA has a dedicated website to the Women-Owned Small Business Program. Those of you that are familiar with the 8A program, or if you've applied for the All Small Mentor Protege program, if you click on certified.sba.gov, if you see this website down here, and beta.certified.sba.gov is for women-owned small business. But you can still get to it by going to certified.sba.gov. And there's a little green box at the top of Certify that if you click on, it goes straight to the Women-Owned Small Business program. Next slide, please. So once the new WOSB regulations go into effect, again, SBA will be providing the online certification for WOSBs and EDWOSBs. SBA will allow for participation from firms certified in the Department of Veterans Affairs for veteran verification if they're woman-owned. And SBA will continue to allow the third-party certifiers. So the self-certification option will be eliminated, but you'll still be able to go into Certify and pull off your information. Next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of timeline changes, this actually started transitioning on July 15th. The self-certification process will remain available until today, but really you don't want to do the self-certification because in theory, we will be issuing decisions on certification starting today. Hang on, I am so sorry. Hang on just a moment. Okay, the updated WOSB contracting program was published in the Federal Register in May of 2020. If any of you need help in finding that, just let me know. Next slide, please. Okay, we made it. Do any of you have any questions? I know that I went through these quickly, and I do apologize.
I do have a quick question about HubZone, actually.
Okay.
You mentioned earlier that the principal office is based on 35% of your employees being in one area, as well as you doing 35% of your work being in one area. But what happens if you travel between states, for example? So say you spend actually equal amount of time in 2 separate areas or 2 separate hub zones.
That's a great question. It doesn't, it's the hub zone is across the country. So it's not just one hub zone area, it's any hub zone area. So say you have employees that are located all over the state of Ohio. We can even go a little bit more local than that. So say they're located in Cincinnati, there's a pocket of hub zone there. There's a pocket of hub zone in Columbus. So as long as they're located in a hub zone, then they are qualified. And the same with your building, the office that you're either leasing space from or you own, that building might be located in a hub zone, but your employees might be located in a different hub zone than that. So as long as they're located in a hub zone somewhere in the United States, they're qualified. And because this is a federal program, you're eligible for any hub zone set aside regardless of geographical location.
That includes if you have multiple offices.
If you have multiple offices, your eligibility would be based on your principal office, where the greatest number of your employees are.
Okay, because the reason why I was trying to be more detailed about That's because there's a potentiality that you could have two separate offices, but still have equal number of employees in both of them.
Then you're not qualified.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's very black and white. If you have one employee, like if you're a home-based business and you're located in a hub zone as the employer, as the owner, you're considered an employee. And if you have an employee that works somewhere else and there's just two of you, if just one of you are in the hub zone, that you don't meet the principal office definition. At least as I know it. I mean, I can ask that question and ask for clarification to see if anything's changed. But I've had firms that have that situation. If it's an even number between two or three or four buildings, then it's an even number, and there's not a greater number of employees working out of a principal office, you know?
Okay. Now that was my main thing, like an even number situation.
Yeah. Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, well, and again, I apologize, you know, the trials of working from home. So thank you for hanging in there with me. I know that I went through these programs quickly, but if you have any questions, feel free to email me. All right, I think that's it, Sharon.
Everybody, thanks for joining us today, and we look forward to possibly seeing you next Thursday morning on our next event, which I think is on capability statements, correct?
No, I think next Tuesday. Yeah, we have cybersecurity.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, with Sharon Smith, and then Thursday we have Beta Sam.
Okay, great. See, I'm ahead of myself, aren't I?
That's okay. That's okay. Yeah, there's a lot of them. So,
Yeah. Okay. So everybody have a nice day.
all right. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.